לדבר גלויות, לפעמים אין לי כוח בעולמך להיות. אנא מפניך אסתתר, מה אטען, מה אצטדק, מה אדבר. חנון ורחום אין לפניך גלוי, כאן יהודי שהלכו את השערה ותלוי, נלחם בעצבות בייאוש המכרסם כתולעת, השמחה נסתלקה ממני וגם הדעת. קולות מהעבר לוחשים לי לעצור, אבל אני מוסיף בחושך לחתור, ושואל ומבקש
יולי רנד.
זקן וכסיל שולח בחיצים, אני הולך וכושל, הוא הולך ומעצים. נשמה קדושה על נתיב כי שבורת כנף, אין תעידי עליי כמה הייתי נחשף, כשסודות מעבר פקדו עליי לעצור, אבל אני מוסיף בחושך לחתור, ושואל ומבקש בסופו של יום נפלט אל החוף, האדמה רחומה אותי אליה תאסוף, ואז אצעק ואצטדק ואספר איך בחושך הזה הייתי חותר ושואל.
Thank you for joining us today on this special BBYO On Demand event. My name is Taya Corsia from Maccabi Tzair Israel Poleg.
And I'm Daniel Katz from Greater Atlanta Region.
On Saturday, October 7th, Simchat Torah, Israel woke up to a massive rocket attack towards the south and central of Israel, starting at 6:20 a.m. Simultaneously, Hamas military infiltrated Israel from Gaza and attacked communities all across the Gaza border. Since then, in an orchestrated operation, terrorists have killed over 600 and injured over 2,000 Israeli soldiers and civilians.
Reports of Israelis taken in captivity across the Gaza border have been confirmed with no accurate number. This is an unusual attack on Israel, and as the government has announced a state of war, we wanted to give you an opportunity to receive credible information, an outlet to share and show support and stand in solidarity with the people of Israel, our siblings in Maccabi Tzair, and the Jewish people as a whole.
I would like to ask Noam Dahari and Ophir Shinertz to share some notes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noam Dahari. I'm the Director of Israel Enrichment for BBYO. I am originally from Korazim in northern Israel and currently in Steamboat Springs, Colorado.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ophir Shinhertz. I am BBYO Central Shaliach, originally from Rishon LeZion in Israel, now based in Washington, D.C.
We are gathered here in support of our friends, family, and the people of Israel. We love you all and stand here and send our deepest prayers for those of us who are far away from Israel. Watching the unfolding events from afar can be very difficult. Many of us feel helpless, clueless, nervous, and afraid of the unknown. We are here today as a community to support each other and in an effort to get a little bit of clarity to what's going on in our beloved homeland. BBYO teens and families from around the world, we are here for you to go through this together.
I want to echo everything that Noam said. On a personal note, I've lived in the States for 2 years, and seeing my friends and family go through this and being from afar is a strange feeling for me. These are the footage that we're seeing, the things that are happening are things that we have never seen before. And it's truly amazing that this community can come together and show its support when we are just looking for ways to get involved. We're just looking for ways to help the people there and be part of this with them. I want to thank everyone for their time and for coming here. And I want to thank all of the people that are about to speak and share from their personal stories and what they're experiencing right now. And send love and strengthen everyone that is now in this situation.
Thank you, Noam and Ophir, for sharing.
These are difficult and confusing times. We are feeding off social media, pieces of unverified information, and reports that are supporting different narratives. To help you get a better understanding of what has been happening in the past almost 2 days, we are joined by Avi Melamed.
Avi is a former Israeli intelligence official and senior Arab affairs advisor, founder of Inside the Middle East, an apolitical, nonpartisan educational nonprofit, author of Inside the Middle East, Entering a New Era and Spearhead of Jerusalem documentary, The Seam Line, fluent in Hebrew, Arabic, and English, recognized expert featured in Financial Times Newsweek, and contributor to USA Today. Thank you for joining us today, Avi. What can you tell us about what's been happening in Israel for the last 2 days? I think you're on mute, Avi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Shalom from Israel. It's here now Sunday evening. We are now marking the end of day 2 for the war that was launched yesterday morning, as mentioned by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, 2 Palestinian militant groups that are based in Gaza Strip. I would like in my next 20 minutes presentation just to provide you with some context, some understanding of some terms, and maybe try to look at the situation and the story of what's going on in Gaza Strip, maybe a little bit from a wider perspective. Let me start just to provide you with this basic map that shows you just the understanding. You could see to the left-hand side the dark spot representing Gaza Strip, colored in black or brown. And you could see the size of Gaza Strip. It's a very small area. It's about 25 miles. It's about 28 miles by 25 miles. You could see to the left-hand side, it borders an Arab state called Egypt, colored in green. And then to the other side, you could see it borders the state of Israel. You could see all these communities that are just around Gaza Strip. You could see Kfar Aza, Nachal Oz, Be'eri, Re'emim, Nir Oz, Ofakim, Netivot, Sderot, and all those places that are unfortunately right now in the middle of all this chaos that is going on right down in the south part of Israel. Basically, you could see very closely that there is no distances between the Israeli communities and Gaza Strip. There is a massive fence that was installed between Israel and Gaza Strip to secure the citizens, to secure the people who lives in those communities, rather known as Otef Aza, the envelope of Aza, because they are around Aza. But as you can understand, unfortunately, it didn't really help. And yesterday morning, we had this massive attack of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, resulting in these horrific outcomes. I want to say a few words about the story of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, to put it in the context so we can understand what are we dealing with. Short history of our times. In 1967, following the 6 Days War, Israel occupied Gaza Strip. Up until then, Gaza Strip was ruled by Egypt, but it wasn't annexed to Egypt. Israel occupied Gaza Strip in the war in 1967, and Israel basically stayed in Gaza Strip until 2005, meaning almost 40 years. During the time Israel was in Gaza Strip, Israel did not annex Gaza Strip. Israel ruled Gaza Strip in an administration which combination of a military rule and civil administration. And also Israeli governments encouraged Israeli citizens to move and to live in Gaza Strip. Those people are known by the name of settlers, and they lived in settlements in Gaza Strip. At its peak, there used to be some 21 settlements in Gaza Strip. In the late 80s, in Gaza Strip, an Islamic fundamental organization is emerging, it's appearing, it's called Hamas. Hamas is a word in Arabic which means religious enthusiasm. It's also the initial of an Arabic frame, Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic resistance movement. Hamas is an Islamic, militant Islam Palestinian group, movement that it's related to the biggest mass movement in the Muslim Sunni world called the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas as such is very hostile to the state of Israel. Hamas, the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood as it defined itself, Hamas vows to eliminate the state of Israel through the use of violence. No concessions, no dialogue, no compromise, no nothing. In course of time, basically Hamas was gaining more and more power within Gaza Strip. In the 90s and in the 2000s, the Israeli settlers in Gaza Strip and the Israeli soldiers that were used to be set position in Gaza Strip sustained an increasing number of attacks inside Gaza Strip. The death toll became unbearable. Israelis were killed, Palestinians were killed. The bottom line of this whole process was that in the year 2005, Israeli government, led by the late Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, makes a decision to pull out from Gaza Strip. And in 2005, exactly in October 2005, 18 years ago, Israel pulled out from Gaza Strip. Israel evacuated all the settlements in Gaza Strip and handed over the control of Gaza Strip to the hands of the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is an entity that was established as part of an Israeli-Palestinian agreement, Israel and the PLO, known as the Oslo Accord, that was signed in 1993. And according to this agreement, this Palestinian Authority was established, and now it became formally recognized by the international community as the representative of the Palestinian people and as the counterpart for the state of Israel for future negotiations regarding the final status and agreement between the sides. The Palestinian Authority took control over the Gaza Strip in October 2005, but the rule of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza Strip did not continue longer. A year and a half later, in the summer of 2007, Hamas, massively armed and gaining a military capacities, conducted a military coup inside Gaza Strip, violently terminating the rule of the Palestinian Authority. And since 2007, Hamas is ruling the Gaza Strip. The second largest military Palestinian organization in Gaza Strip is called Islamic Jihad in Palestine, which is smaller than Hamas, but massively equipped and trained as well. You may wonder, where did Hamas and Islamic Jihad gain their support, their money, their trains, their military support, and so on and so on? The answer for that has to do with another regional player, which is Iran. And now I want to put the story of Hamas and Gaza Strip and the current crisis in the wider perspective. In 1979, there has been a revolution in Iran called the Islamic Revolution. Following that revolution, Iran changed its nature. Iran became an Islamic Shiite theocracy led by what is known the Mullah regime. Mullahs are the Shiite clergies. The Mullah regime in Tehran is a fundamental, extreme extreme power that is motivated by extreme ideology and revolutionary outlook of the world. And one of the major features of that regime is its non-compromising hostility towards the state of Israel and Jews. The Mullah regime in Tehran vowed also to eliminate the state of Israel. The Mullah regime, as part of his campaign to become a power, the leading regional power in the Middle East, basically identified the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a great opportunity to harvest dividends and support and to basically infiltrate into different parts of the Arab world. Remember that the Iranians are not Arabs, they are Persian but not Arabs. And basically the Mullah regime was positioning himself as the defender of the Palestinians, allegedly as the defender of the Palestinians in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That has been done under a banner that is called the Resistance. Remember the name of Hamas, the initials, Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic Resistance Movement. The Mullah regime very well used that term resistance in order to harvest dividends and support, political dividends and support. And actually what the Mullah regime was unfortunately quite capable of doing was to entrench himself in different parts of the Arab world, and particularly in areas that are bordering Israel, and to build in those Arab states, Lebanon, Syria, Gaza Strip, and other places, to build local domestic forces that are basically serving the Iranian interests. The Iranian massively arms those proxies or agents, if you wish, massively support them, finance them, and so on and so on, and actually created what we call the axis of resistance, an array of different militant groups, massively armed by the Iranians, trained by the Iranians, equipped, financed, and so on and so on. And the Mullah regime was creating this array of groups of militants. And when you look at this map, you could see the symbols that describe those different groups. You could see to the left-hand side in the bottom, you see Hamas. This is the lower logo, and above that you see Islamic Jihad. And then when you go a little bit up, you could see the logo of the most powerful proxy of the Iranian regime in the region, known as the Hezbollah, the Party of God, which is based in Lebanon, an Arab state that borders Israel from the north. You could see that on the map in front of you. In the last couple of years, in addition to those proxies, the Mullah regime took advantage of the war in Syria, another Arab state that borders Israel, and the Mullah regime was able to entrench himself through a network of militias that he is supporting, and basically also entrenched himself in Syria. The outcome of this accumulative process that I was describing was that the Mullah regime in course of time has been building what we call the Ring of Fire. That explains the symbols of fire that you see in front of you. And the Ring of Fire is actually representing a very alarming and challenging situation where actually the Mullah regime was to a large extent able to create a ring of fire around Israel's neck. You could see the symbols of the flames in Lebanon. You could see the symbols of the flame in Syria. You could see the symbols of the flame in Iraq and other Arab states that does not border Israel, but it's not so far from Israel, relatively speaking. And you see, of course, Gaza Strip below. You could see the flame of the symbol of the flame. In all of those places, the Mullah regime was able to create those domestic powers. And basically, the Mullah regime tactic is actually to exhaust Israel with the repeating rounds, mostly initiated by Islamic Jihad or Hamas in Gaza Strip, massively arming those militias with weapons and tactics and strategies that are deliberately targeting Israel's soft belly, which is the civilians, the civil society, the civil structure, the cities, and so on and so on. And that explains, for example, the fact that in the last 15 years or so, the major military, not the only, but the major military threat that Israel has been dealing with increasingly was the shooting of rockets. Dozens and dozens and dozens of thousands of rockets launched from Gaza Strip, in some rounds, small rounds with Hezbollah in Lebanon, also from Hezbollah, from Lebanon. And in parallel to that, as we said before, those groups have been gaining military capacities, significant military capacities on the ground, financed, armed, supported by the mullah regime. Hamas military forces in Gaza Strip are estimated at some 35,000 people. Islamic Jihad are around 10,000 people, massively armed. Hamas governs Gaza Strip. Hamas legislates laws. Hamas has a military forces. Hamas has police. It has courts. It has is charging taxes from the people. He's importing and exporting. All of those things. Hamas, practically speaking, is the government of Gaza, rules Gaza, and reminding you, Hamas is, among other things, leading the charge of destroying Israel through the use of violence. Since 2007, there have been repeating military rounds with Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip. Each and every one of those rounds became more and more intensified and violent as Hamas and Islamic Jihad grew stronger in Gaza Strip. And in time, parallel to that, also the threat they present to the next-by Israeli communities was further expanding. In the beginning, the threat was directly shooting short-range rockets from Gaza Strip, targeting the communities around Gaza that you see in front of you. In course of time, the range of the rockets exponentially grew, and parallel to that, the lethal. They became more and more lethal, more and more heavy, more and more loaded. And today, we know, as you probably know, Hamas rockets are reaching Jerusalem, they are reaching to Tel Aviv, and present, among other things, a growing significant threat to the state of Israel, as you probably know. Right now, as we are looking at the situation on the ground, obviously, we are facing a very, very challenging situation because, first of all, unfortunately, the massive blow that Hamas was able to succeed caused us an enormous shock in all possible aspects. I can tell you that I've been asked many times during the last 48 hours in an endless interviews, how did it happen? What happened? How was it possible that Israeli surveillance and monitoring and military presence around Gaza Strip was unable to basically stop this attack, intercept this attack? The answer for that is not an answer for 5 minutes presentation. It's a complicated issue, and it takes much more to address that. There is a lot of things to be explored, addressed, learned, and so on and so on. One of the aspects of that is that Israeli intelligence and the Israeli security forces and the IDF, they have so far exercised an outstanding performances, capacities in intercepting terror attacks. Some of those performances are simply like jaw-drawing, sort of speaking. So there was a lot of reliance, there was a lot of trust on those systems, and now there is this big crisis, this big friction, which you can understand is part of the challenge that we are dealing right now, and obviously the horrific outcomes of this attack. As of now, 600 fatalities, and Israelis, most of them are Israeli civilians from the surrounding communities in around Gaza Strip, dozens of Israelis that have been taken as hostages and taken into Gaza Strip, soldiers and civilians, and 2,000 people injured, many of them in a critical condition. Following that attack, the state of Israel, the government of Israel announced a state of war. And here is the picture right now. But before I say a few words about the picture, I want to refer a little bit to the question that I was also asked. And why did Hamas launch this war? This question is interesting because in the course of time, Hamas policy, Hamas radical approach resulted in a growing challenges and grievances inside Gaza Strip. Reminding you, Hamas rules Gaza Strip. And in course of time, Hamas radical way and the repeating military round with Israel and the violence of Hamas, the brutality of Hamas, resulted in a growing discontent and resentment within the Palestinians in Gaza but also in the Arab world, who actually hold Hamas, and accurately so, as responsible for the gloomy reality in Gaza Strip. In the last couple of years, Hamas find himself facing a mounting criticism and anger as the crisis within Gaza was deepening socially and economically. In the last couple of months, there has been open riots and demonstrations in Gaza, where the Gazan people basically demand Hamas to provide them with their needs. There were calls for ousting the Hamas government. Hamas brutally oppressed those protests. The state of Israel, trying to alleviate the pressure on the people of Gaza, basically gave lots of permits to dozens of thousands of Gaza people to come and to work in Israel in the last year, and in order to alleviate the pressure. And indeed, dozens of thousands of people from Gaza entered Israel in the last year on a daily basis to provide their families. And so that was an interesting situation where Israel basically did this service, and that service was helping Hamas interest to calm the protest and the discontent in Gaza, because it helped people in Gaza to improve their everyday life conditions. That was one of the things that basically was apparently underlying the Israeli assumption that Hamas has no interest in being engaged in a war, because now the situation in Gaza was improved and conditions are better. Obviously, that assumption was found to be false. The question is, why did Hamas then attack Israel? The answer for that, I think, is a combination of two things. Very shortly, one is the power struggle within the Palestinians themselves. There are two major Palestinians, I've mentioned them, power players. One is Hamas, the other one is the Palestinian Authority, and the major organization within the Palestinian Authority, which is the Fatah organization. There is a hostility between the two. They are both fighting for leadership of the Palestinian people. Hamas says its way, meaning the way of violence, the way of war, the way of terror, and so on, is the right way for the Palestinians to decisively win against Israel. The Palestinian Authority says to Hamas, look, your way basically dragged Gaza Strip just to one big havoc and misery and disaster. And the two parts are just in constant collision. So Hamas is all the time looking for points to basically base his power, his place as the leading Palestinian organization. So this is one thing. But that for itself does not explain enough why did Hamas launch that war. Now comes the second component, and that has to do with the issue of normalization. You probably heard about the Abraham Accords, about the agreements that were signed in the last couple of years between Israel and Arab states, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco. The Abraham Accords basically fueled the growing discontent among the Palestinians, who actually felt that they are being abandoned by their brothers, the Arabs. Recently, with the growing reports about the growing Israeli-Saudi dialogue and the possibility of an Israeli-Saudi agreement, and particularly following an interview made by Mohammed bin Salman, the heir of the Saudi monarchy, to Fox News, where he basically said, look, we are willing to do the agreement with Israel. And he said, like, we expect that the conditions of life of Palestinians will be improved. That was for the Palestinian, like, feeling like this is the last nail in their coffin, because Mohammed bin Salman didn't say anything about two-state solution, about the issue of East Jerusalem, about the story of the Palestinian refugees. That fueled a lot of Palestinian discontent and anger. While the Palestinian Authority was much more settled in its criticism, Hamas was much more overt. And actually, Hamas said, we are going to send a message that this is not acceptable. We, Hamas, we will be the one who decides what will be the trajectory of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And reminding you, Iran has an interest in further fueling the flames of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because the more they fuel the flames, the more the Iranians are able to portray themselves as if they are defenders of the Palestinians, though they couldn't care less. And therefore, Iran has an interest in fueling the flames. So you see a conjunction of interest between Iran and Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Each one of them, for its own interest, has a reason to be together in this extreme dangerous alliance. Right now, we are looking at a situation where it seems like that Israel is preparing itself to a major military move in Gaza Strip. Simultaneously, the eyes also are turned to the north, and this is to the area of Lebanon. I mentioned it before, the Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Hezbollah is much bigger than Hamas and Islamic Jihad combined together. We are looking at capacities of dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of thousands of rockets of all kinds that the Hezbollah has in possession, including heavy rockets, including accurate rockets. And so now, as we are looking at the situation in Gaza Strip, one of the major concerns is that we may now see a scenario that we call the unification of the arenas, meaning that simultaneously, Israel will have to deal with a multi-front war in Gaza Strip, in Lebanon against Hezbollah, maybe also against some attacks that will be launched from Syria, conducted by an Iranian-backed militias that are present in Syria. So basically, right now, we are looking at a scenario that is not totally fiction, where basically we may find ourselves in a situation of a multi-front, whole, total war, and this is going to be enormously messy. It's going to be enormously violent. It's going to be enormously intensified with everything that comes along with that. The war, unfortunately, is taking place in the cities with the civilian communities. We just as an example of the terrible example for that, the civilians are finding themselves in the front line of this battleground. Right now, we are looking to see what will be the developments. It seems like that Israel is making military preparations for a huge effort. And it seems like that the military preparation are also taking into consideration the possibility that the war against Hamas in Gaza will expand also to Lebanon against the Hezbollah. This is a scenario that we are all watching very closely to see how things will evolve. So right now we are in a very early preliminary stage of what seems to be like a long, challenging, tough days ahead, perhaps of a multi-war scenario, perhaps. And obviously, as I said before, the civilians are going to be in the front line of fire, obviously the soldiers as well. It's very clear that if there will be an Israeli massive ground operation in Gaza Strip, we will see a lot of fatalities on both sides. Probably many civilians will be hurt as well. The purpose of this massive ground operation is not fully clear, but it's quite clear that this is, if that such a massive ground operation is going to be launched against Hamas in Gaza Strip, the purpose of that will be to try and to create a different reality. Some people in the government basically describe it as severely crippling Hamas ruling capacities. Some people are taking it more to a place of saying like, we are determined to create a totally different reality in Gaza Strip. So all in all, we are looking at a situation where if that scenario is going to manifest itself on the ground, we may look at a situation of a massive war, intensified war, very violent one. And it could, maybe, potentially, it depends what will be the outcomes of this whole situation, maybe result some new reality that maybe will be some place for a hope for both Israelis and Palestinians in Gaza Strip. But this is, of course, something that we'll have to wait and see. This is the situation as of now in Israel, the end of the second day to the October 2023 war with Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Your questions are more than welcome, of course.
Thank you, Avi. We are now going to open the floor for questions. Please feel free to use the raise hand feature to send your questions on the chat, and we will call you to unmute to ask out loud. If you would like us to ask you on your behalf, please send your question directly to Ophir or Noam.
צריך לטעון את זה. בחוץ, אני חושב. בחוץ.
Avi, I'd start us off with a question. What is different in this round of attacks by Hamas than other things that we've seen before? Why is it hitting Israel in that impact? What has changed on their side?
Well, we knew that one of the things Hamas constantly was trying to do was to breach to Israeli communities, to occupy, to massacre as much as possible Israeli citizens, and to take hostages. That was the terrifying scenario. That was the nightmare scenario of the Israeli security establishment. Up until today, Israel was able to prevent that. But yesterday, it was totally collapsed. Hamas, yesterday's attack is an enormously massive blow to the state of Israel. This is an enormously painful strike Israel that will have a long ramifications. The fact that hundreds of Hamas militants stormed into Israel, the massacre they conducted in communities for hours, the horrifying outcomes and scenes of Israeli civilians and soldiers taking, some of them dead, some of them alive, as hostages into Gaza Strip. These are all things that are very, very traumatic for all of us. You could understand how people feel in Israel vis-a-vis those scenes and that terrible outcome. It's something that we will have to take a long time, if at all, to recover from.
Avi, thank you. We have a few questions from our community. Caro is asking, do you think that Israel will advance beyond the Gaza Strip? I think it means beyond into Gaza.
Well, I mean, Israeli military ground operation, should it take place, is supposed to take place inside Gaza Strip. That's the meaning. So I guess that's what she meant by saying Gaza Strip.
No,
Thank
just
you.
so if you think that Israel will have to like go into the rest of the territory rather than just defend itself from the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, well, when I'm talking about Israeli military ground operation, I'm talking about that Israel will cross the border between Israel and Gaza, and Israel will enter to Gaza Strip and conduct a military ground operation inside Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip is not part of Israel.
Avi, Thomas is asking.
Sorry, we have another question in the that was sent to us privately. Is there any link between the attack and the 50-year anniversary of the Yom Kippur War?
Well, first of all, of course, is the time. It's almost the same date. It's very likely that those who were beyond the planning of this attack were targeting or aiming around this time of the year. Also because it's symbolic with 50 years following the Yom Kippur War, and also because the attack, similar to Yom Kippur, though it didn't happen in Yom Kippur, but it took place in a holiday. This time it was Sukkot, and it was also Saturday. So obviously something that also the planners of this attack were taking into consideration when they orchestrated this attack. It's very clear that there are Iranian fingerprints beyond this attack. The Hamas itself basically openly said more than time that he admitted that he's massively supported by the Iranians. unfortunately, that attack was very successful as far as Hamas is concerned.
I'll just tell everyone that we're getting a lot of questions coming in from all of you. Thank you so much for the interest. Our BBYO staff is going to stay here beyond the program formal time to answer those questions. Avi, another question that came in from Thomas is, how will dozens of hostage affect the possible ground operation into Gaza?
Well, that's an excellent question. Obviously, you can understand this issue is enormously sensitive. It adds to the whole complexity of the situation. We got Israeli civilians and Israeli soldiers, hostages in Gaza. We don't know how many exactly, what's their identity, what is their medical condition. It's all totally obscure and vague. So this is a component that has to be taken into consideration when you're talking about a massive ground operation. However, I think that if I understand correctly, from a military perspective, as harsh it may sound, I don't know to say necessarily that on top of the priorities of the military plans comes the issue of the hostages in Gaza Strip. I think that in the end of the day, from a military perspective, and I would say cold cut perspective, obviously there are other priorities that military planners has to take into consideration. One of the added one is the issue of the refugees, of the hostages, but I don't know to say if this is something necessarily that is on the top, that it is dictating the whole course and trajectory of the military plan. One of the aspects of the military plan is that it is expected to produce an intelligence, including intelligence regarding the whereabouts and the conditions of Israeli hostages. But that is, I would say, that is this is a secondary, sort of speaking, objective when you look at the large scheme of things. Again, I assume that if we will witness, as it seems like, a massive Israeli invasion to Gaza Strip, the major objective of that will be, in the end of the day, to set a new reality in the whole game rules, sort of speaking. I don't know to say what will be the end outcome of such thing. Nobody knows to say that. Is it going to end up with a totally destruction of Hamas rule? Is it going to end up with destruction of most of Hamas ruling capacities? Is it going to end up with totally reoccupation of the Gaza Strip? Nobody knows. All of that is a question signs, marks, and nobody has the answer on that. Of course, needless to say, that one could expect a very, very, very difficult scenes coming as an outcome of this scenario, where you see massive military clashes taking place inside Gaza Strip in an area that is also massively populated. Obviously, Israel is trying to do everything possible to avoid collateral damage, but we all know that it's almost impossible. It's no 100% guarantee. Needless to say, soldiers that will be killed and others. So we are looking at a very, very complex scenario. And we'll have to see how things will evolve. And again, reminding you that we have to keep eye all the time also on the Lebanese arena.
Avi, we're getting a lot of questions in the chat. I'm gonna try and give you two now, if we can try and answer them as well before we have to move forward. The first one was, why did the Iron Dome fail to prevent the major rocket attack this time? And the other one is referring to the current situation within Israeli politics. How will the conflict surrounding the judicial reform affect this war?
Well, about the performances of the Iron Dome, I don't know to say exactly. I understood, or to the best of my knowledge, that this whole massive attack was accompanied from the beginning with a massive barrage of thousands, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 rockets that were launched from Gaza Strip. I think that that part of the attack did not result in the massive outcome that we saw. The massive outcome was because of the infiltration of Hamas militants into Israel. So I think, largely speaking, Iron Dome was doing his job, largely speaking, intercepting most of the rockets that were supposed to hit something. As for the second question, I think there will be lots of ramifications. This is a mega event. This is an event that has regional dimensions and repercussions. This is an event that has strategic repercussion. And among that, it also have a deep repercussion on the Israeli society, the Israeli public realm, the Israeli political fabric and structure. As you probably know, you mentioned the whole issue of the crisis in Israel, the judicial reform, the story of Haredim drafting to the army, not drafting to the army, all those things that basically keep the Israeli public opinion, political system so busy in the last year. Unfortunately, manifested into a deepening crisis within Israel, which also was one of the things basically that was incentivizing Hamas to launch this war. That was not the reason, but you could understand that it was incentivizing Hamas to launch this war. I personally tend to assume that in the face of such disastrous outcomes and shock that happens to Israel, priorities hopefully maybe change. Maybe the whole thing of judicial reform and all these things will be pushed aside. We got yesterday a very brutal, painful reminder of priorities. We got it in the very, very, very hard way. And I can only hope that, the impact of this shock, the trauma will help to some sort of like recorrect the trajectory of Israel that was definitely in the last year set out of course. One of the interesting thing, and I think it's very powerful to see that, you see how immediately Israelis are turning to be proactively supportive and to take action and to take control back. One of the things today is interesting. My daughter, I was talking with her and she said, look, Dad, I think we should go and contribute blood. And I said, sure, that's a great idea. And you simply can't do that because the lines are enormously long. It's amazing to see that. You see hundreds and thousands of Israelis that are standing online to donate blood, to give blood. We understand, unfortunately, we may need a lot of blood supply. So you see that, and you see all kind of like how Israelis are coming together, trying to get out of this very, very rough situation. And that's for itself a source of courage and strength. One last thing that I want to say just before we conclude, because I know that you have your part that you've, just one thing. Please be careful with all the information in social media. Be careful with that. Let me tell you something. Since the beginning of this war, we're now 2 days into that, I didn't look at all at social media. I'm deliberately, knowingly cutting myself away from that. You don't have to do that, but if you are looking at social media, please, please, please exercise a lot of caution. There is a lot of misinformation. There is a lot of disinformation. I'm going to just give you an example. Hamas published information with some photo allegedly arguing that it has also kidnapped a senior Israeli general. That was a fake news. Today, everything can be faked. Everything. You just need to be enormously careful with social media. And one other thing, please do not echo any piece of information that you may come across. Do not. If you don't know that it's coming from authorities that basically provides guiding information, do not provide any information. Do not circulate that. Do not echo that. There are people out there that are simply sick with all kind of like, ugly things that they are doing, with all kind of like terrible things that they are doing. So please, please, please be enormously careful with that.
At this point, we would like to thank you, Avi, for your time today, helping us have a better understanding of the situation. If anyone still has any questions after, we'll be staying back to help answer. We would like to call on some of our sibling Israel teens. We would like to call on some of our sibling Israel teens from Maccabi Tzair, our sister movement, to share some of their feelings and tell us about what they've been experiencing in the past 2 days. Talia, can you start and tell us a bit of what you've been experiencing?
Yeah. It's been very stressful for me. I don't live in the area where the rockets reach. But seeing all the videos that are posted online and hearing the news, it's horrifying, like hearing what the terrorists have done, seeing what they did to people, and everything just feels so surreal. Like no one's out on the streets, school is canceled. Usually when something like this happens, like when we get attacked from Gaza, the government will call it an operation. This time they called it a war. So that like it really like it gives it's just a bad feeling. It's just really bad. Yeah. A few of my other friends here from Maccabi would like to speak. Elia.
Yes. So my name is Elia Hajjaj. I'm from Beersheba. It's 30 miles from Gaza. So I had a few alarms, something like 20. And one of the most scariest things in this war is not the alarms, it's more the terrorists that are now in the cities and shoot and killed and kidnapped a lot of Jews, something like above 100. That is a new thing in our wars and operations because it's never happened something like in 50 years. So yeah, it's really scary. And I have a Chanichim in Maccabi, like they are a lower grade that I they're madrich. And I talk with them and they're really scared and talk with me something like every day. And they scared because I like my little brothers. So that's all.
Thank you, Elia. Amit.
Hi everyone, I'm Amit. I'm from Karmel Sif. It's basically like the center of Israel. We're not really used to this. Like I'm not so close to Gaza, so like we don't really experience the sirens, but what we've been through in the last 2 days, it's really scary. It's something that we've never been through. Like yesterday, we had a few hours that we couldn't really get outside. We had to stay in our houses because there were sirens every few minutes. And like I also talk to my chanichim and they are really scared and like don't really know what to do because we haven't experienced something like this in many years and maybe ever, and they are really scared. They're small. And like I see some photos and like read the news and everything, and I really can't believe that this is what's happening in my country, like in my home where I'm supposed to feel the most safe. And like my dad is in the army right now. So he's a pilot in like a helicopter squadron. He got called yesterday and he's calling every few hours to like say I'm fine. But when he's not calling, we can't really reach him. And I really don't want to think like what is he doing now? So we're just really hoping for this to be like over, and I hope that's soon.
Thank you, Amit. Lian.
Hi, so I'm Rian. I live in Gedera, which is in south of Israel, and it's 40 kilometers from Gaza. For the past 2 days, we had sirens, as you know, and I had 3 rockets that fell in my city, and one of them was right next to my school. it crashed, like it was a big fire and everything. And I don't know how many of you knows, but other than the sirens, there was a big party in Kibbutz Reim, which is next to Gaza. And during the party, dozens of terrorists came to the party and started attacking and shooting everyone. And most of the teens in the party are injured, or they were kidnapped, or unfortunately dead. And in my city, there were many teens that went to this party, and most of them are or injured or kidnapped. And also there are 2 teens that were murdered there from my city, and I know them. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Lian. And for the last one, I would like to call Eyal.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eyal, and I live in Zichron, which is the north part mostly. Not really northern next to Hezbollah, but more central north, so I don't get rockets for now. And as we watch here and we sit here and we watch it for 2 days on like the TV and the news, and I can't really process it. So I'm trying to do my best, but it's really hard now. My dad was in a special unit and he wasn't called yet, but he might be. We have a different situation here, so we're trying to stay optimistic. But my chapter is gonna run some donations tomorrow, and it wasn't really like we all came together and said, okay, let's do our best and let's try and keep everybody motivated so we can actually get out of this situation. So we're gonna run some donations and hopefully help everybody else. And also, I'm hosting 2 international girls from a mechina, which is preparations for the army here in my house, and until this war is over. So that's my part. And hopefully, we're not gonna get any sirens, and we're gonna finish this thing very like in the near future, because this is terrible. This is unbelievable. Thank you for being here, and we appreciate it.
Thank you all for sharing. We are sending our prayers and support from all around the world in these difficult times. At this time, a lot of us are looking for ways to get involved. Noam, Ophir, can you please share some ways to do so?
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your stories and your perspectives. As Avi said before, in terms of getting reports, getting involved in understanding what's happening, we ask you to avoid feeding off of social media. That information is not always verified. That information is a lot of time out of context. I would also say that there have been a lot of videos that have been running on social media that are uncensored, and you can see faces and people are sharing them around, and families are learning through social media they're losing their loved ones and they are kidnapped before the authorities are able to reach them and verify the information and let them know. So we're asking to not share on socials videos and footage that is uncensored until it's posted on news and that families have been contacted. If you are looking for live updates and verified information, we would offer you to go into the Ynet live updates in English. They're running a website of live updates minute by minute in English using the official IDF social media pages through the different platforms. And all of the Israeli news channels are reporting only verified information. I can say personally that I have seen videos on the Israeli news channels that I've saw a day before earlier, and only a day after they were able to release the footage. That's how fast information is spread today, and how long it takes them to verify the information, let the families know, and so on. I would also say in terms of resources, if you're looking to understand more, if you're looking to host calls in your regions, if you're wanting Israeli teens to join you, reach out to us. We can connect you with our Israeli teens, with our staff, people who are there to help give you guidance, support, answer your questions, and give you more perspectives. Feel free to reach out to Noam, to me, to all of the teams on this call that you see. Some of them you already know, they're your friends from summer programs for IC. Check in with them, and feel free to text and ask them to join you. I'm sure it's, as much as it is important for us to have this opportunity for them to share their stories with us, I'm sure that for you, everyone in Israel, it's also an outlet for you to like share your story and your perspective. So we appreciate it. And I will hand it off to Noam to talk about other types of ways you can get involved.
Thanks, Ophir. And before I touch on the organizations we can get involved with, I'll just say that it's just heartbreaking and so sad. And thank you all our Maccabi teens for sharing. The stories are really difficult to hear. And I want to say, as we started, that both Ophir and I have, and others on this call, experienced situations like this, both from Israel and even from the battlefield, and here from the US or other places around the world. Don't underestimate how difficult it is to experience things also from afar. It is more than okay if you feel all of those feelings, if you're nervous or stressed or sad, hearing the news, even if you're from afar, and don't feel that it's not okay because you're far away. Some of us, when we're so far away, one of the things we feel is that we feel helpless and we don't know what to do. One of the things we can do, we collected here together, I'm going to share my screen, and you can see a list of organizations that we think are a good start of organizations to look up, to get involved with, and donate. All of those organizations open special donations, campaigns specifically for the situation we're at. The first one is the Jewish Agency for Israel, הסוכנות היהודית, that collects money for all of the most immediate things, from helping terror victims and elderly, and fixing and building bomb shelters and so on. And as it say here at the end, also helping those with PTSD. This is a big one, which also is a good segue to the next organization, which is Natal, which is the Israeli Trauma and Resiliency Center. That one of the biggest things that are happening in Israel now is that as a nation, we are all going into some kind of a trauma situation. And we want to help those that are in trauma and those of us that need the help. Natal is the main organization that does so. So this is another good one to be in touch with. And the last one that many of us that have been to Israel know, because we see them on the street all the time, is United Hatzalah, Ichud Hatzalah. Ichud Hatzalah is a pretty innovative organization of volunteers that are riding mostly on motorcycles, and really quickly get into the areas of attack or injury of the terror event that's happened, and they can get there faster than many other people, faster than some ambulances, and they have paramedics and medics that are providing life-saving first aid to those who hurt. And Ichud Hatzalah is another really good one to be in touch with, donate, support, and look up. And now we're going to go back to you, Daniel and Talia, for to conclude our gathering today.
Thank you all again for joining us today. We can feel the love and support from our brothers, sisters, and siblings all across the world.
As we conclude this event, please join us in a prayer for the state of Israel. Talia, you can read the Hebrew first.
Yeah. ופורס עליה סוכת שלומך, שלח אורך ואמתך לראשיה, לשופטיה ולנבחריה. ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך, למען ילכו בדרך הצדק, החופש והישר. חזק ידי מגני ארץ קדושנו, והנחילם ישועה וחיים, ונתת שלום בארץ, ושימחת עולם ליושביה, פקד נא לברכה את אחינו, בית ישראל, בכל ארצות פזוריהם. תא בליבם אהבת ציון, ומי בהם מכל עמנו יהיה אלוהיו עמו ויעל. האצל מרוחך על כל יושבי ארץ קדושנו, אסר מקרבם שנאה ואיבה, קנאה ורשות. ותא בליבם אהבה, אחווה, שלום, שלום ורעות. וקיים במהרה חזון נביאך, לא יישא גוי אל גוי חרב, ולא ילמדו עוד מלחמה, ונאמר אמן.
Rock and champion of Israel, please bless the state of Israel, first fruit of the flourishing of the fruit of our redemption. Guard it in abundance of your love. Spread over it the shelter of your peace. Send forth your light and truth to those who lead and judge it, and to those who hold elective office. Establish in them through your presence wise counsel, that they might walk in the way of justice, freedom, and integrity. Strengthen the hands of those who guard our holy land. Let them inherit salvation and life, and give peace to the land and perpetual joy to its inhabitants. Appoint for a blessing all our kindred of the house of Israel and in all the lands of their dispersion. Plant in their hearts a love of Zion. And for all our people everywhere, may God be with them, and may they have the opportunity to go up to the land. Cause your Spirit's influence to emanate upon all dwellers of our holy land. Remove from their midst hatred and enmity, jealousy and wickedness. Plant in their hearts love and kinship, peace and friendship, and soon fulfill the vision of your prophet Nathan. Nation shall not lift sword against nation. Let them no longer learn the ways of war.
Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate your support. And if anyone still has questions, you are welcome to stay with us. We'll be here for a few more minutes. We're all praying for better days to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone has a question, feel free to unmute and ask. We're here.
Hey, Justin, and am I seeing you raising your hand still?
Hi, yes. That was fantastic and heartbreaking at the same time, if that makes any sense, but thank you for doing this. Something that, is Avi still with us on the Zoom?
No, Avi left the Zoom call.
Okay.
We'll try to be the second best. I'll try to answer, and Ophir,
Yeah,
Ian, and Rona here with me to help.
my question really was for the group, but you know, I was thinking about Avi's comment about social media and being careful with information, which I agree with, and that ties into a question about the psychology of the people who are demonstrating support for Palestine across the world, and the distinct absence of support for, or at least visible support for Israel, in the sense of people gathering, you know, in large crowds on streets in Western cities with the, you know, with flags, and it makes me think of, I don't know if you're familiar with Sam Harris, but he's a fairly famous moral philosopher who made the argument several years ago that Israel has the moral upper hand because it doesn't use children and innocent non-combatant civilians as human shields. And so I guess I'm just wondering, what is going on, in your opinion, in the way this conflict is being communicated to the youth
who are Palestinian nationals, whether they live in Gaza or in Western cities. So that was a long statement, but I hope you get the gist of it.
Yeah, I think I do. And Justin, let me know if I don't answer your question, and all the rest feel free to hop on and fill me in. But I think in this case it's no different than any other conflicts we had with the Palestinians, right? People tend to live in their own narratives, right? And as Israelis and Jews, we live in our own narrative and our own set of values that's affected from our story as a people and where we came from. And same for the Palestinians, and same for the reality that they grew up in. I don't think that we have much immediate ability to change the narrative of Palestinian children and the way they grew up and the way they observe the conflict with Israel. I think that this is maybe the area that we least have control on. We definitely have the ability to do it with our teens, with our Jewish teens around the world, but within the Palestinian teens, I think very little ability to to show or present the values that we relate to. Justin, does this answer any of your question, or you want to specify?
I think it scratches the surface of it, and I appreciate the response, but it's obviously a much longer conversation, so I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'll just continue and say that young Palestinians, kind of like we're moving for a second because of your question to the Palestinian angle. Young Palestinians, they grew up, same with young Israelis, right, with the reality of war and conflict. It's a difficult reality to come out of, and honestly, I'll tell you on a personal note, one of the things that saddens me the most in escalation such as this, that it just takes us even more far away from the ability of the people to gain trust in each other. Same for Israelis. How can Israelis, after what we're seeing now, ever trust the Palestinians as partners for future peace? I don't know.
In my limited experience of having spent time in Israel and worked with Israelis for many years, the impression I have is that on the daily working level, everyday life, there is a peaceful coexistence amongst non-political people who, they're just going about their lives. But I think that probably that is sorely misunderstood outside Israel. So when you see gatherings of people, on the streets of Toronto, or, pick your city. I picked Toronto because I'm originally from there. It's troubling that they have this indoctrination, this narrative, as you refer to it, and don't really understand that there is a coexistence that exists, and there is also another political layer that almost wants to perpetuate conflict.
Thanks, Justin. Any other thoughts in the room?
Oh, I'm sure there are, but
I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay. If we don't have any other questions, thank you so much for your time today. Talia, Danielle, thank you so much for leading us today, and for everyone who helped us make this happen. I think it was super meaningful and important for our teens, our staff, our community in general. I know we had some other guests here as well to have this space today. So thank you for making this happen. And I'm sure there are more to come on the next days, and we'll create a game plan for that as well. But I'm happy we at least now had that opportunity to share with everyone. And we'll play it by ear and see how this goes and how else we can offer support to our teams and staff in Israel, to our community in the global world, and just thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ophir and
Thank you.
Noam, for creating this space for us.
Thank you.
תודה ליאן שאת פה.
תודה, thank you.
Talina, תודה. Daniel, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.